So to round out our speakers for today, we have Joey McCollum, who's currently a PhD student at ACU, studying under the supervision of Stephen Carlson, Kylie Crabbe and Rob. Joey did his undergraduate studies in New England, majoring in mathematics and creative writing. He then worked as a software engineer for 10 years, during which time he learned ancient Greek. He's already the author of a number of books, including The Tale of Peter Rabbit in Koine Greek. His PhD thesis is on the topic of using Bayesian phylogenetics to study the history of the text of Ephesians. And just last year, he won the 2024 ACU 3-minute thesis presentation award. So Joey, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. The first SBL annual meeting I ever attended was 7 years ago. I remember sitting in a warm lecture hall, happily insulated from the freezing Denver winter, and watching with wide eyes as a soft-spoken Australian gentleman opened a slideshow written in LaTeX and began speaking about an expansive suite of software tools he had developed for working with textual traditions. That software was Codex, which you can read about in detail in this new book. And the gentleman was Rob Turnbull, and I'm grateful to have him as a colleague and doctoral supervisor. To start on a general note, this book is a treasure trove of insights and innovations, as others have already said. Back when it was an unpublished dissertation, it was the source of many citations in my own thesis. Now that I've revised the page numbers for all of these citations to match the published version, I've gained a more visceral appreciation for just how much I've learned from Rob's work. But even more than that, reading the final product, I was delighted to find myself learning even more. I hadn't really thought about how classic algorithms for tasks like aligning texts and calculating the similarity of manuscripts could be redesigned in a probabilistic way, which allows us to measure how certain we can be in their results. I hadn't realized just how rich the history of the lectionary was, with a shift from a Jerusalemite system to a Byzantine one that affected the Arabic tradition. I never knew that there was an Arabic lectionary whose scribe wrote references to the demonic upside down. That was cool. All of this is to say that there are many things that readers from a variety of backgrounds can learn from this book. But I'd like to zoom in now on the technique of Bayesian phylogenetics and how Rob adapts this approach from evolutionary biology to textual criticism. The importance of this contribution to the field is hard to overstate, but because of its technical nature, it is always at risk of being overlooked by scholars whose eyes glaze over at mathematical formula, or, as Rob puts it, by theologians pressed for time. But as Rob's accessible introduction to Bayesian phylogenetics makes clear, this method is designed to accommodate uncertain judgments about the text and to measure how well different conclusions about its history are supported by the data we have. This is crucial in our line of work because the surviving manuscripts of a work represent just the tip of the iceberg for its entire tradition. And in order to reconstruct a model of the entire tradition, we have to make hypotheses about a lot of the missing pieces. And to complicate matters further, the judgments that we make about which variant readings were original and how the other ones arose are rarely, if ever, certain. But Bayesian inference is all about reasoning in the presence of incomplete data, which makes it an optimal approach for what we're doing. The density diagram that Rob presents in Chapter 6 highlights both the complexity and the power of evaluating hypotheses about textual history in a Bayesian way. Uncountably many hypotheses are possible, but if the ones that are best explained by the data have a lot in common, then we can be confident about certain parts of the textual history. The stomata or family trees presented in Chapter 9 nicely illustrate the measures of certainty we can get from this Bayesian approach. One of Rob's most important innovations, in my opinion, is his way of accounting for contamination or mixture of sources by scribes. This is an infamous problem in textual criticism. In fact, I'm understating the case. It was such a serious problem that for nearly a century, we thought that it made it impossible to reconstruct the textual history of the New Testament. Now, while Rob does not propose a general purpose solution to this problem, he does show that we can easily account for a very common type of mixture, which is assimilation to the popular text. Specifically, this can be treated as a type of scribal tendency, and as such, it can be encoded as a parameter in a substitution model. But better still, in true Bayesian fashion, we can sample different values for this parameter and estimate which values are most likely in light of the data. In other words, we can estimate how likely it was for scribes to behave this way. Rob goes even further and observes that we could do this for a variety of different classes of scribal tendencies. He stops short of implementing this in his study for practical reasons, but his suggestion is one that I've taken up and have been testing out in my own research. But what he does do is he shows how we can estimate a wide variety of scribal habits using the results of a Bayesian phylogenetic analysis. Specifically, for every stemma or family tree output by the analysis, we can reconstruct the readings of the lost ancestors that we've hypothetically reconstructed. And then, using our own classifications for changes between readings, we can count the different types of changes that took place in that stemma. Rob is too humble to say this in his study, but this approach is a huge methodological step forward in scribal habit studies. A bit of context will help make this clear. Starting in the mid-20th century, New Testament scholars started investigating how to quantify the probabilities of different scribal behaviors for the purpose of informing text-critical judgments. The earliest approach was the singular readings method, where we look at all the places where one manuscript disagrees with all of the others, and assuming that its reading is unoriginal, we get one piece of data about the scribe that produced that reading. In terms of textual history, this is just looking at the outer twigs on the family tree, so to speak. But later on, scholars would show that we can actually look at all of a manuscript's reading if its exemplar is extant, and we know what it read, and we can confidently reconstruct the common ancestor of extant sister manuscripts. So if we can do that, then we can do it for more than one manuscript at a time. And now you can see how the trajectory of all of this research into scribal habits basically culminates in what Rob has done. When we have an entire family tree of witnesses and we can reconstruct the lost ancestors' readings, we can get a comprehensive tabulation of scribal habits. New Testament textual critics really need to know about this. So in conclusion, Rob's work is not just pioneering, but impressive in its breadth. To be sure, there are some parts of the Bayesian phylogenetic model that can still be adapted even more for use with textual traditions. I'm thinking of the model used to evaluate the prior probability of a stemma, and the branch rate models, which can sort of be informed more by things like the copying and loss rates of manuscripts. So this is an area that I think would be an exciting avenue for future research, and and I'm also looking forward to working more with Rob in the near future in incorporating the data of the Arabic versions in the textual tradition of Ephesians, which I'm currently working on. But thanks to Rob's work, we can turn to these avenues of research next, and honestly, I'm very keen to see where it all goes. Thank you, Rob.